For the Cleveland Browns, the summer of '72 was a disaster. Due to injuries and an unsettled quarterback situation, the team lost all 6 of its preseason games. Indeed, with Mike Phipps on the bench, the Browns lost the opener to Green Bay. Then for game number 2 in Philadelphia, Coach Nick Skorich made the big change, and Mike Phipps started at quarterback. Both the passing and the running of Cleveland's young quarterback was the difference as the Browns won their first game of the year, beating the Eagles 27-17. Phipps' fine showing pleased no one more than Bill Nelson, the man he replaced. This was the final season in a great career for courageous Bill Nelson. Arch rival Cincinnati was next. Led by a ferocious defense, the underdog Browns limited the Bengals to merely 2 field goals and completely dominated the game. But what brought the fans to their feet was the passing of Mike Phipps. This game marked the beginning of the Phipps to Pitts combination that was to devastate both opponents and sportcasters for the remainder of the season. The new partnership had combined on a 68-yard touchdown, and Mike Phipps had fully established himself as the #1 quarterback as Cleveland had its second win, a 27-6 rout of Cincinnati. After the victory over the Bengals, the team had the wind taken from its sails as the Browns set a team record by handing the Chiefs 8 turnovers. A Mike Phipps touchdown pass to Fairhooker was Cleveland's only score in the calamity with Kansas City. The plummet from the height of victory to the nightmare against the Chiefs was not without reason, for a string of injuries unprecedented in the team's history was taking its toll. Against the Bengals, Ron Snydau had a broken leg. He was the last remaining defensive end from the year before. The offensive line also was hit, with regulars Jim Copeland and Bob McKay lost in the early going. Things got even worse in the next game with Chicago. Cleveland's offense was reduced to 0 as the Bears shut out the Browns. The loss was Cleveland's 2nd straight and 3rd in 5 games. The team had reached rock bottom. But Nick Skorich and his staff remained calm in the face of disaster. The offensive line was revamped and returned to stability. Second-year tackle Doug Deacon and 15-year veteran Gene Hickerson comprised the left side of the line, and 6-year guard John DeMari remained on the right. But Bob McKay recovered from a broken leg and returned at right tackle, and in the most significant change of all, a trade was made for Bob DeMarco, a 12-year former All-Pro center. Here, after 2 consecutive losses, the entire season turned around for the Browns. In the Astrodome, the Phipps-Pitts combination resurfaced again. Still, in the final quarter, Houston led Cleveland by 1 point. Then on a 3rd down possession call, Mike Phipps found Fairhooker and kept an 80-yard drive alive with the big play. With time running out, Phipps coolly called his own number and tunneled under the Oiler defense for the winning score. The Browns had snapped their losing streak by coming from behind to beat Houston 23-17. The next Sunday, in freezing Rocky Mountain temperatures, Cleveland again got behind early. In fact, the mile-high Broncos led going into the 4th quarter. Then a poised Mike Phipps took charge of the game and led his team to yet another come-from-behind victory. Cleveland's final score came after a great 3rd down play in which Phipps was toward the sideline, yet still got off a 45-yard pass that Fairhooker grabbed before being knocked out of bounds. Several plays later, Phipps scored the winner himself for the 2nd straight week as Cleveland evened its record at 3. Next was a rematch with Houston. It was a day for defense, as a wave of white sacked Oiler quarterbacks 4 times and stopped Houston in a great goal line stand. In the 4th quarter, the offense awakened, and led by Leroy Kelly's 2 touchdowns, Cleveland had its 3rd straight victory. A rare shutout, 20-0. Under a beautiful California sunset, Mike Phipps put on a brilliant passing exhibition in San Diego. Cleveland's young quarterback scored his 3rd touchdown in as many games as the Browns took an early lead over the Chargers. But with just over a minute left in the game, San Diego came roaring back and took the lead on Mike Garrett's touchdown. It appeared Phipps' heroics would be wasted. With just 47 seconds remaining in the game, the Browns were faced with almost certain defeat, and Mike Phipps with his greatest challenge as a pro. But on this Monday night in San Diego, the Browns, Chargers, and a national television audience saw a young quarterback drop a miracle out of the California sky. As the stunned Chargers trudged beaten off the field, the jubilant Browns celebrated one of the most exciting victories in their history. Cleveland had come from behind again and had its 4th win in a row. The following Sunday, the Browns met the Steelers, leaders of the Central Division. The Mike Phipps aerial show continued, and the Browns jumped off to a commanding 20-3 lead. Then the Steelers turned Franco Harris loose, and the complexion of the game quickly changed. Late in the final period, Pittsburgh had taken a 1-point lead and had the Browns in a 3rd and long situation. But on a brilliant call, Mike Phipps crossed up the Steeler defense on a fake flanker reverse and gained the crucial 1st down. And now with the ball in field goal range and just over 2 minutes left, Cleveland seemed certain to win as Don Cockcroft attempted a 27-yard chip shot. But the kick soared inches wide of the upright as 83,000 sat in stunned silence. Cleveland had seemingly blown the game. But Cleveland's dogged defense refused to quit and stopped Terry Bradshaw on 3rd down. Now, with just 58 seconds remaining, Mike Phipps had one of his greatest moments. Slipping and sliding in the muddy turf, he unloaded 2 perfect passes over the middle, despite a prevent defense designed to stop them. Phipps had again brought his team to field goal range, and with only 13 seconds left, Don Cockcroft, standing in almost the same spot, got his 2nd chance to redeem himself and win this vital game. The great come-from-behind win was the Browns' 5th straight and put them in a tie for 1st with Pittsburgh with a 7-3 record. It was fitting that the man that did it was Don Cockcroft, for his 5th season was also the best season for him. His field goal percentage of 81% was the best in the league, and a 57-yard field goal against Denver was the 2nd longest in NFL history. Today, in the mud and gloom of a November day in Cleveland, the Browns earned a victory that will rank with the most dramatic in their 23 years in the NFL. 7 days later, O.J. Simpson and the Buffalo Bills made their first appearance ever in Cleveland and threatened to run the Browns out of the ballpark. But once again, the Browns wouldn't quit. As he had game after game, Mike Phipps calmly rallied his team as Cleveland overcame a 10-point deficit. The final score came when Nick Roman caught a tipped Buffalo pass and took the trophy in for a touchdown. It was Cleveland's fifth come-from-behind victory in a streak that had now reached 6, and it assured them of yet another winning season. The Browns are the only NFL team that has not had a losing season in the past 10 years. In the melting pot called Three River Stadium, the Brown streak was ended by Franco's Italian Army. The Steelers decisively won the rematch and now led the division by a full game with only 2 more to be played. Next came the Bengals in their own stadium. This game was a must, for both teams had a chance for the playoffs. Cleveland took an early lead on a sensational play by the Phipps-Pitts partnership. But the score was costly, for Mike Phipps had been knocked unconscious on the play. With Phipps out of the game, the Bengals surged ahead and Cleveland's playoff hopes seemed dim. But in the second half, Mike Phipps proved his courage and returned to the game. The Browns' offense had again refused to quit and had taken the lead. The defense, too, wouldn't give up. Linebacker Billy Andrews' interception at the goal line saved the game, completely killed off any Bengal chances for postseason play, and assured the Browns of at least the wild card berth in the American Conference playoffs. In the season's 14th and final game, the swirling winds of Shea Stadium forced both teams to stay on the ground. Bo Scott, back in form after season-long injuries, broke off a long touchdown for Cleveland. But beginning the second half, all the Browns had to show was a tie game. Here the Browns made a daring strategy change in an effort to break the deadlock. Phipps, despite the winds in the second half, was to put the ball in the air. The young quarterback's strong arm and great catches by all 3 Browns receivers combined to defeat the elements and the New York Jets. Phipps' mastery of the treacherous wind was so complete that his last pass traveled over 55 yards in the air to Frank Pitts. The 80-yard score was the longest of the year for Cleveland. The team finished second, 1 game behind Pittsburgh, but had earned the wild card spot with an excellent record of 10 wins and only 4 losses. Unprecedented injuries at defensive end caused 10 different players to start at the position in '72. Former All-Pro Rich Jackson stemmed the tide for a few games, but a knee injury claimed him. Free agent Nick Roman finished the season for Cleveland and played well. The other end spot was capably held by Bob Briggs. Briggs, whose true position as tackle, took over a regular role when the rash of injuries began in preseason and proved to have a knack of making the big play all season long. Through the injury epidemic that wiped out the end position, Walter Johnson and Jerry Shirk stood like a pair of giant oaks as the heart of the Browns' front 4. Because of the makeshift situation on their flanks, Johnson and Shirk had the additional responsibility of rushing the passer. Both excelled at this phase of football as well. Walter Johnson is the old pro of the 2, and his 8th campaign was one of his finest. Jerry Shirk, the youngster in his third year, came on fast and should continue to improve. Together, they give Cleveland what Nick Skorich calls the best pair of tackles in the game. Johnson and Shirk lived up to that accolade in the season of '72. The Browns got a big lift at linebacker by the play of Charlie Hall. He joined Billy Andrews, number 52, on the outside, and Dale Lindsey, number 51, in the middle as starters. But it was the rapid rise of number 59, Charlie Hall, that was one of the most significant developments in Cleveland's fine season. Only in his second year as a pro, the 6'4", 220-pounder not only has great strength, but brings unusual quickness and speed to the position of outside linebacker. The Browns feel that rugged Charlie Hall will be a star for many years to come. For the second straight season, the secondary led the conference in pass defense. They were veterans Ben Davis and Walt Sumner, and two youngsters, both of whom were number 1 draft choices, Clarence Scott and Tom Darden. They gave Cleveland the fastest secondary in the team's history. Ben Davis had another fine year since recovering from a serious knee operation. In his 5th season as a Brown, Davis has the speed to cover any receiver in the game. Slender Clarence Scott was the other corner, but his slimness fails to mask his rugged play and penchant for going to the ball. Tom Darden was last year's first-round draft choice and played like a number 1 should. A regular from the start, Darden proved he's a hitter. This shoe belongs to Don Cockcroft, one of only 2 men in the league who served double duty as both punter and place kicker. In his finest season as a pro, Don Cockcroft was named the leading kicker in the National Football League for 1972. Leroy Kelly had much reason to smile last year. He moved up to 4th place among the greats in the league's all-time rushing records, and with his inspired play and leadership, served his team well in the role of co-captain. After a series of nagging injuries, Bo Scott came on strong late in the season and starred when it counted the most, in the playoffs. In his 7th season, Huge Milt Morin continued to be one of the outstanding tight ends in pro football. His sure hands are probably his greatest asset to his team. Long, lean Fair Hooker also had a fine year at wide receiver, catching 32 Mike Phipps passes. But no one enjoyed a finer season than Frank Pitts. His partnership with Mike Phipps made him the Browns' leading receiver and scorer. Pitts was the Browns' deep threat, their game breaker, and week after week made the big play in 1972. But the rise of Mike Phipps was the biggest story of all. Phipps turned the future into the present and completely changed the outlook on the Warfield trade by earning the right to be number 1. Despite his youth, his teammates discovered Phipps was the man they could look to as a leader. With Phipps at the helm, Cleveland added a new dimension to its attack. For with his great size and strong legs, Mike Phipps established himself as a dangerous threat who wouldn't hesitate to run with the football. But most of all, Phipps possesses a powerful throwing arm. Game after game, his poise and confidence grew to the point where in his first full season as a starter, Phipps established himself as a genuine star. On a bright, beautiful Christmas Eve in Miami's Orange Bowl, the Cleveland Browns met the undefeated Dolphins in the playoffs. The team had come a long way from the time its record was a dismal 2-3 in October. In the first half, Miami received a huge break when a Cockcroft punt was blocked for a touchdown. Later, a field goal was added to make the score 10-0 at halftime. Miami's famed no-name defense had stopped Cleveland cold in the first half. But at the start of the second stanza, Mike Phipps calmly called his own number, rolled out, and scored. Cleveland had pierced the Dolphins' vaunted defense, and now it was up to their own to stop Miami. The Brown defense responded with a magnificent display of gang tackling that had the Dolphins reeling, as a bevy of brown jerseys stopped Zonka and Kick. The Miami air attack also was completely devastated by the Cleveland defense. The Browns' heroic effort had shocked Don Shula, and the tempo of the game very definitely turned toward Cleveland. With one bold stroke, Mike Phipps held his ground despite a ferocious line charge and delivered a picture-perfect pass to Fair Hooker for a touchdown. The Cleveland contingent went wild, for with over 8 minutes remaining, the Browns had taken the lead 14-13. But Miami was not to be denied. In one great surge downfield, the Dolphins showed why they were unbeaten and would go on to become Super Bowl champions. So on Christmas Eve in Miami, the Browns' great season was ended. But the finish came on a high note, for Cleveland had given the Dolphins their toughest game of a perfect season. Again, the team had surprised its critics by refusing to quit, for such was the character of the 1972 Cleveland Browns.